The Prime Minister entrusted her with this work. Why don't you create a task force and find out the condition of women beyond their houses, doing work which was not labeled as work. So it never found a voice, labor movement for women, and that too informal. SEWA came and gave that kind of a voice.
Namaste, welcome to Postcards, your passport to unseen corners of people, policy and politics. One of the things that we hope to do with Postcards is to talk about some of the lesser discussed topics and kind of bring nuances in those conversations, things that we often don't talk about in the day-to-day life. Today's topic is titled Off the Clock Women in Labor, and in this topic we are going to talk a lot about how did women enter the workforce, what kind of rights they're fighting for in the formal workspace, and how the same kind of rights are not afforded to women in the informal sector. While we were researching this episode, we came across this beautiful quote and a very powerful quote from Baby Haldar's autobiography, Alo Andhari. She was herself a domestic worker, and she wrote, "In the dark silence of the night, after everyone else had fallen asleep, I often thought about my life. When was it made me, a woman, bear the brunt of world's burden silently? Why did society think that a woman's toil, her labor, her struggles were just a part of her existence and not something to be acknowledged or valued?" This sentiment really hits home, right? It talks about how women's work, particularly domestic work, is often undervalued and underappreciated. These kind of conversations are what we are going to have today, and a lot more, discussing social cultural dynamics, the power structures, and the intersectionalities of identities that exist within all of these dynamics that exist. Today I have Sanchita Mitra with me, with whom we'll be discussing all of these conversations. Sanchita Mitra is National Coordinator of SEWA Bharat. And SEWA is actually a union of close to 2 million workers, but women workers who are working in informal economy. And that 2 million, I just want to repeat it again, 2 million is 20 lakhs is such a huge number that we often don't think about. Thank you for coming and welcome, Sanchita Mitra.
Namaste, Nikunj Bhai. Always a pleasure to interact with you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Lovely meeting you again.
No, pleasure was all mine. Of course, like I was very, very lucky to have spent like a couple of years of my life at SEWA, which really shaped my understanding about a lot of things in life. But very interestingly, I called you Sanchita Mitra and you called me Nikunj Bhai. Can you give a little bit of history? How did that come into SEWA?
Actually, the SEWA's history starts from Gujarat, where this informal worker women's movement started. And in Gujarat, people refer to women as Ben, means sister, and men as Bhai. So it also means we refer to our women as this Behan, Lakshmi Behan. So Ila Ben is a founder. But coming from a very corporate background, it took me time to also address our office people as Bhai and Ben. It is also a way of eliminating that hierarchy, the feeling that this is a sir, that kind of a control a person has. So I find it beautiful to refer to Ben and Bhai, though it took me some time.
No, of course. And I think I'm actually also curious, how did you end up in the kind of work that you're doing right now? Because you didn't start that way.
Yeah.
You started your journey very differently.
Yeah. So I think working in Pricewaterhouse, I had the education, the professional background, the exposure. But since my children were very small and I had to do a lot of tour, it gave me an opportunity to experiment with some kind of voluntary work. But that time I realized that I had no reference point. I wanted to work for an organization, but my friends had no knowledge about this. So I actually started volunteering in Pune, giving 1 day in a week. And that was also a time when I was rediscovering myself. And that one day kept me energized for the entire week. So when I came to Delhi, I really thought to take this up as something that I would do for myself. That time I never thought of doing much for others, but more for myself. And it was a coincidence that a book landed at my place. It was, I'm looking for that book, but it was by the national, it was a congregation of 10 stories that made India proud. And that was, one was like, there was Lijjat Papar, Konkan Railways, Amul, and one was SEWA. And that was the first time I heard and read about SEWA. And another coincidence is somebody connected when I was looking for a voluntary kind of a work in an organization. So somebody connected me to this organization in Delhi. So I really feel blessed. Probably there were plans made for me, which I did not see.
And how long have you been in SEWA
20
now?
years. I've stopped counting now. I think 20 years.
Yeah, and like I've seen like many folks who work at SEWA kind of end up at SEWA. Renana Ben is like she has been there for I don't know how many years, and she joined as an intern when Leela Ben started this organization.
Yes. She also joined at the time where SEWA was being formed. Where and SEWA's beauty is
which is
1972. 1972. We call it 72 because that was the year when the union got registered. Because we were also exploring that we need some kind of a legal entity to bring women together. Our objective was to get that voice by bringing women together, but we thought that probably union structure would be more helpful. So 1972, the first union of women workers, informal workers, was registered, and it was the first of its kind. And we knew only what was happening in Gujarat. It grew, it went to other states, and parallelly it got connected to women workers over the globe. And that is where we also discovered that few of the issues are common. So you have greater voices, you can talk to ILO about it. In fact, we were so naive that we always use terms like lots of women, few women. So Marty Ben, who is the professor in Harvard, she came and said that you have to have data. So when you talk to the government, you have to get data. So we started numbering them, enumeration, then some research happened. Then we also found that because we used to all go to the fields and we saw lots of women were working, staying at home. And they were so invisible, yet they were doing some kind of a work. In fact, they themselves did not call themselves workers. So we, SEWA counted them and gave this figure to the government. So that is how government thought, oh my God, so many people, so many women. So then we asked for policies. So this home-based workers, this was actually something that originated from Ila Ben, and this is a term that has been recognized by ILO. So start small, start from the grassroots, then grow big, make bigger changes. I think that's the way. Yes, Renana Ben came as an intern, and she had a good scholarship from Yale. She postponed it for some time because she wanted to give more service. Then I think she did this once or twice. Then ultimately she made up her mind to be part of this movement, start. In fact, it was more or less the starting process. Now you see SEWA in 18 states. Internationally, I think all the academic institutions, I think, I'm sure in Oxford also you must have seen many books on SEWA.
Yeah.
So
and case studies.
Case studies.
So many case studies.
Yeah, SEWA is a thought. It's a movement. It's something very empowering. You have to feel it. I feel that about SEWA.
No, of course. I mean, first of all, congratulations to SEWA for covering, for more than 50 years.
Yes. That's a big thing. Now, how to be relevant with so many changes, that's another challenge.
Of course.
I think we are used to taking up challenges.
Yeah.
So I think that's the way of life here. But
no, of course. And I'm also curious towards the end of the episode when you share the postcard that you have written to your future self. So we'll ask you to share that at the end of the episode. But talking about years, right? Like historically, women were often limited to their role and work in as domestic, like within domestic households, where it was considered to be as labor of love, and not really considered as something that, like, a proper value add that they're adding, and you're not even recognizing that, right? Over a period of time, women started entering the workforce, and they faced a unique set of challenges while they were doing that as well. But can you like share a little bit about how do you say it? Like, how did women started entering the workforce in the first place?
I think one was a challenge that women would not come out of the houses, but definitely during that time also, which is prehistoric, means for ages they have helped in agriculture, may not have gone to the fields, but slowly I think the labor also demanded more people around them. So they were doing some kind of a work, even sitting at home, looking after the cow, their goats. This always happened. I would also say, I think there were hidden work that they were doing. Looking after the family, of course, that was not valued, but they were doing some kind of a work, but economic pressure pulled them out of the house. So more and more women, even if they were not recognized, were contributing to the economy. So, but the recognition started coming later, when we had to really get them together, to have a voice, to visualize them. So that is how they started getting recognized. A long way to go, but definitely in India, I think Ilaben was the pioneer, where she found so many women doing such arduous work, like carrying. In fact, that history also happened because many of the women were pushed to more work, because many of the textile mills were on strike. Men were not earning enough, so women started taking up all kinds of work. So, but they themselves never considered themselves as workers. There were no rules, regulation. In fact, today we have an Aadhaar card for each person. The government has also ensured financial inclusion. There was no bank account. There was no Aadhaar, no identity. She was somebody's wife. So there was no recognition. She needed money but could not access. So those were the issues I think Ilaben started picking up. The beauty of it is that I had never imagined without a blue, what do you call that, without a kind of a roadmap you can go ahead. But this whole movement developed very organically. In response to certain situation, you assess the situation. There are disadvantages, but I think there are more advantages, because you're not copying something. You don't have something ready in your mind. You're always analyzing and doing that. That's the way SEWA has grown, and that's the way how women were brought as leaders. Some part was economic empowerment. Some part was also we took that ownership that we really have to work on policies. So when Ilaben was represented in the Rajya Sabha, so she really pushed for that social security bill for informal workers. So yes, at the ground level, at national, multinational level, I think SEWA has been contributing a lot.
No, 100%. And I think while like you were sharing how women started entering the workforce, but they were all already part of it, like farming, for example. And it's funny, like so many things also feel like they haven't changed. Like you think about industrial era when women like formally started coming into it, and we think about like these sweated industries. That's a concept that evolved, where women working for long hours, very low pay, with minimal production, minimal social protection, and very poor working condition. And in a lot of ways, if you look at informal economy, that is kind of very similar in a way, and you feel like nothing has really changed. And Sorry.
Historically, if you see in Europe, when the war was happening, men were at war. So women were entering workforce.
Yeah.
Women with small children.
Yeah.
So, and the society was not prepared to deal with it, yet they were.
Yeah.
So I think it traces back long time back.
And talking about England only, you know, I think with war, for example, over there, I was seeing this documentary, interestingly, about football players and how when the war happened, men were all at war. Football was like a good pastime, so women started playing football, and it suddenly grew popular, drawing large crowds, etc. And when men came back, the women football matches were drawing still more crowds. And the Football Association actually banned women's football for quite a couple of decades. Before it came back. Such was the threat to men's football.
I know. I think women are still adjusting with the economic situation, so they're still adjusting.
Yeah, and it's crazy, like, if you think about it, you know, in a lot of ways that way. But I was also curious about how have your experiences been in the workplace, right? And if we compare it to the experiences of what your grandmother or great grandmother would have, like, you know, how would her workday look like, and how is your workday different from her?
First of all, I think my grandmother and all, they stayed in a very extended joint family, not even joint, extended joint family. So looking after the children was not one person's responsibility. The children got looked after. Secondly, the children hardly stayed at home because outside the house was the playground. I remember my mother saying they used to go to the river, get hold of fishes, lots to do with nature. So that part was assured, but they took up a lot of responsibility of cooking, cleaning, and one or two things. Now that when I think about it, they also helped their spouses in their work. Like, I remember my grandfather used to work in that, I think, in ships. This was pre-independence. So there used to be Britishers used to come. And my grandmother used to make sweets. And naturally there were no hotels, so his meal was there in this house. So in one way she was facilitating the work of my grandfather. So she used to write, there used to be those molds. And I remember my mother saying that there was one mold which had English thing, that sweet memories, thank you, come again. So this gentleman, he said, who made the sweets? So my grandfather said, my wife, I must meet her. And my grandmother was so angry. Why should he come and meet me? So I think some work or the other they were doing. I also remember, because they had a little education. So in the afternoon, after all their work and all, they used to get hold of poor children and lock them up in a room and teach them. So they also thought of doing something for the society. It was so nice to think that was happening. So some way or the other, I think they were part of the social structure beyond their houses, doing work which was not labeled as work. So that was happening. And of course there were farmers, as I said. Of course there were, I think, cleaners to sweep the houses or the roads. I'm imagining there could have been more women doing that, more than I can think of, but there were. And so typically their work starts with grandfather going and getting fresh vegetables, fresh fish from the market. So they used to have a big kitchen, and 2-3 women used to get into cutting, and there was a good division of labor. So there used to be the eldest Bahu, who was in charge of seeing what was happening and all those things. So they got into the kitchen work, so feeding them. A few went to their offices, few went to school, few stayed at home. So in the afternoon was a little nap time. That is the time when the children used to nap, and they used to get other poor children to teach and all. So in the evening again getting into the kitchen. But to tell that, I would also want to mention that the structures of the houses were so different from the societies that we live in, that many things were built around that as a response to the needs. Like, for example, there was this big kitchen, and slowly, when the families were also partying, so they had this kitchen overlooking a big space where the children used to play. So it was everybody's children. So the women used to always see who is coming from outside, how the children are while they were cooking. The structures were always built in that case. So I think that kind of facility was there, where it is the children get looked after by lots of people. The house is structured accordingly. Typically now I think it is for anybody getting ready for office, not missing a train, not missing the last that kind of a metro, rushing, too many things to arrange, dependence on the domestic worker, and of course work itself is so demanding. And with technology, I think it is, you're connected. If you're into a kind of a mobile oriented work, so you're connected, so work never ends. For others, coming home and again cooking, I think workload distribution has decreased, so work per person has increased.
Right.
That's something we have lost.
That's very interesting. And just before that, we were also talking about SEWA, right? That way. Going back, I was just thinking about SEWA. It emerged from a national labor movement, right? Like it was part of those movements. Like what? Like the labor movements of the past, at least in India, were also tied to, you know, the freedom struggle in a lot of ways. Like it wasn't very dissuaded with each other. So how do you look at some of the labor movements that we had before independence, after independence, and did women always had a place in these labor movements, considering like what you just shared, right? The women of that times, they were working, they were supporting the men in their businesses, but they were not even like recognized that way.
I think till SEWA was found, what was happening was they were not together. So sporadically, I think they were, spread. So it never found a voice, labor movement for women, and that too informal. SEWA came and gave that kind of a voice, because the women were always working, but to talk about them, to get 10 women to talk about their work was not happening. So a major part of India was invisibilized. So I think Elaben brought that out by getting women together. So that was the part that brought. So that kind of thrust came as a movement. So understanding their issues came as in the forefront, to give a voice, representation. So making and also getting represented in certain fora. So that gave a true voice and kind of a direction to that labor movement for women. It was very sporadic, and not much could be done before this.
And how did the labor movements were looking like, for example, before India got independence as well?
Yeah, you see, independence was also something that many of the women either supported from their houses, because what I read and what I hear from my grandmothers, many of the women also gave their jewelry, gave that kind of a support. So during that time, there were women who were into the workforce, but I think not much was said about their working women's rights. That there was something to do about their rights. Not much was said about it. And independence itself, the direction was very different. So, but after independence, what happened, even I would say Elaben had her roots, because her father also worked with Gandhiji. So somewhere that kind of root about organizing, getting people together, that is the way, whether it's for independence or for kind of a women's right, the process that she built in was through that kind of. And she had a mentor called Anusuya Ben, who was the textile millowner's daughter, greatly again influenced by Gandhiji. So she also worked a lot about this issue, because she also saw lots of workers around the factories or outside the factories. Inside the factories, there were mostly men, but outside the factories were waiting for what you call chini, that small byproducts of those cloth. So they used to make small quilts and all. So getting them together. So people started seeing these women together.
Mm-hmm.
That was, I think, some change that they brought after the, and it was soon after after India got independence. 47 it got independence, 72 this was formed.
Yeah.
The thoughts were sown 2 years earlier.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, and the movement existed. It was just like in
yeah.
1972 they felt.
Yeah.
We still not have a voice. Obviously, we are part
so
of
the
movement.
voice came.
The voice came.
Voice came.
As a very powerful light.
And after that also, when she was part of the Rajya Sabha, she wanted that let us have a study about who are these people, where do they stay, what are their lives. So that time the Prime Minister entrusted her with this work. Why don't you create a task force and find out the condition of women? So that happened about 40 years back. And that's a document, it's worth seeing. In fact, Ilaben, on her last birthday, she gave us a task of going to those villages and finding out, has the situation changed or not? So we could go to a few villages and tell her what the situation. I'm seeing a lot of attitudinal states. At least people now openly, how much ever you believe, will not say that the girl should not be going to school. Like, it's very shameful now to think about that. So it was something that very casually people said that she will do this work. So that kind of attitudinal shift, definitely lots of policies started coming in. So, it's important that you also have representation in decision-making committees. That is something Ilaben has been taking. I mean, it has been organically developed, but so holistic that I felt, how did Ilaben get that vision? To getting women together, no, that's not enough. You also have to have a place where decisions are taken.
Yeah.
So that was very important.
Yeah. And when women were entering the workforce, right? Of course, there were a lot of power and oppression dynamics that were playing out, right? They were and still continue to face discrimination in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when women enters the workforce, right? And this is formal workforce. We'll come to informal in a little bit. But when even women are entering the formal workforce for the first time, what do you think? What kind of unique challenges do you think they face?
In the formal workforce, first of all, because she's a woman, at times it is thought whether she will continue. What happens after she gets married? What happens after she gets children? Is she capable enough? So these questions do come to the people, and that is one challenge. And in many of the formal places, of course, many of the policies, not only the laws have been enacted, like POSH and all, but having a decent place to work where you are treated as equal. And if you work in a place where mostly there are men, whether you feel comfortable, whether men are also accommodating. You see, this is something called a mindset change. We all come from a particular mindset. So this change also has to come from a family. Not everything can be brought by law. So whether you also treat that woman as an equal, as a colleague. So those things, I think those are struggles that you face. So I think even maternity laws, those kind of challenges are there. Definitely there are laws, but that also could be for the women or against the women. It also points out that taking care of the child is the mother's responsibility. Yeah. So people are talking about it, questioning. I think it's important to question, then only you need to change. Even when I refer to my previous organization, so many things have changed. When I talked to my ex-colleagues, they said probably there were issues that you did not have a forum to voice, you did not have a platform to. Now there are platforms to voice. So I'm finding there are good changes, but of course these are all multinational organizations which have laid down rules and all. But there are so many people who are in semi-formal workplaces, whether they are protected by some kind of a law, and whether they know the law. That is another challenge.
Yeah.
So I think those challenges are there, but having more and more women would definitely make certain changes. Women in responsible position in the organization, hoping sensitive, sensible women sensitive women should be present. And I would not say men are not. Lots of men I see are also very sensitive towards women. I think that is a change that we all have a role to play.
Yeah, I think you talked about women, sensitive women. I remember reading this book, Invisible Women, by Caroline Perez, where she talked about how in the Scandinavian countries, which are considered to be like, so much ahead of the rest of the world in terms of rights, right? And in some ways they are. But like, it talked about how the very act of snow cleaning was so gendered because the men were in charge of this exercise, and often they were prioritizing cleaning the streets of the snow, and that's an issue there. Of course, like in our hills also at times we face it, and they would prioritize roads which will go from the home to workplaces. Versus women, they're doing multiple things. They're dropping kids to home. They're often going to the supermarket, and so they're doing like five extra things, navigating that, and because of that, they were more likely to get injured. Because of slipping on the snow, because of other things, which was a burden on the healthcare system. And when they started listening to women, I'm not sure like if women became in charge or they just thought, okay, finally we should listen. I mean, of course, they were less. Suddenly the load on the health care also reduced because less women were now getting injured.
Correct.
And they're the ones who
Such
are
an
like
interesting
doing that.
way of looking at it now.
So sometimes we just like don't listen.
We don't listen.
Like the policies or like whoever, even in multinational corporations, in different places, even in governments, either we don't have women as decision makers, or we just don't listen to them. What do they really need? Or even in this case, overall, that there was a huge economic benefit, but we never thought about it.
Yes, correct. I know, and I also had a tough time talking about my very individual challenge, which was a genuine challenge, which is affecting my work, because I did not have that space or a relationship. Now that coming to SEWA, the first thing, the first day when I entered SEWA, so there was this interview, calling it interview, though nobody interviewed me, most told me about the organization. So there was this lady who walked in and said, "Jo, Acha, I'm making my traveling plans." Huh? So I was listening that she was telling her senior, "I'm making my traveling plans. So actually that day, my mother-in-law will come. So can I go on Wednesday and all these things?" I was thinking, okay, you can make your travel plan based on your personal life, which is a genuine part of your life, and that is listened to. And that is, I thought, a small change. Was it very difficult? I could not have imagined telling that this is one factor which could affect, because it is one very special factor for one or two people. Even I was one of the minority that time. So this was one thing that struck me. The other thing, I peeped into a room and this was looking all new. So there was a training going on for members, and one of the member had brought her infant child. So I was thinking, if you allow women to get their children and you create a little space or something, some little difference in the way of allowing, then women can attend trainings. They need not go back. They did not participate. I thought, what a beautiful way of doing things without thinking much. And these are not very like a huge thing that you need to do. Small mindset changes. So I found that very beautiful, very beautiful.
No, of course. And I think something else when you were listing down, right, and how the different ways you talked about capability. You talked about a lot of other things, right? You mentioned that women don't feel capable enough at times, right? It's not that they're not capable of, they're definitely. But where does that stem from?
I remember there was this photo exhibition, because there are many times, Nikunj, you also must have felt that things are happening around you. You probably have not realized or did not have kind of a language for that to articulate. So there was this exhibition about women in SEWA only. So somebody just said, there are times in women's life when they go down. One is during marriage, one is during childbirth, second is could be their in-laws or parents' health issues. But women are capable, they bounce back. Then I was thinking these are natural processes, and one of these natural processes made me feel guilty that I'm not working enough, made me also take a decision that I should not be working now, I should be giving more time to the family, made me quit that workforce. And I felt I was, at least maybe there was something that I was not being able to do. I never thought of this as certain pauses in our lives. So if you try to see that, you feel that's more scientific because of women has to give the birth, but there are other processes in the social structures which does not allow women. So we can also make the social structure to help her remain in the workforce. So it's a way that you look at it. And having that kind of professional education, professional background of working, this never struck me, Nikunj.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Interestingly, there was this study by Harvard Center for International Development which suggested that there are so many socio-cultural factors and dynamics. If these continue to be the way they are, we'll never be able to, the gender discrimination will never stop.
Yeah,
in so many words, it's a very sobering reality, essentially, in a way. And when we think about things like this, and you also mentioned it a little bit, do you think women feel safe in the workplace? And obviously we're talking about all women, obviously each and every woman's experience is unique, but do you think overall women feel safe in the workplace? And if not, how does that lack of safety manifest?
I have been working in this women's organization, and now I'm not conscious about this anymore, because having so many women to work with itself feels very safe. The other part is that if you have any kind of uncomfortable situation, there is a person that you can go to. So I think we are blessed, we are unique, but many of the women who are working in formal circumstances do not feel that. Even if you have 100 kinds of laws, how many would feel comfortable to use that kind of a thing? So there are very subtle things that could be happening. Even the fact that your promotion, your progress is also measured. Oh, she has been taking leave because of various reasons. Why do women have to take more leaves for children's illnesses, husband's illness? Or I've also heard of women who say that I reserve all these for my family's illness, and when I'm ill, I definitely go to office. So these are all pressures. I think these pressures are there. Women are still working, and women are still struggling. Lots have changed. But if we have this kind of an education, not the degree education, I'm saying more awareness and sensitization, I feel the next generation could be better placed. The next generation is also, all the people also come from a family, that mindset. The next generation also sees the mother working, maybe some distribution of work happening. So they could be probably hoping could be in a better situation. In the informal setup, definitely there are situations because, economic power also rests with the men. Even if it is a family kind of a work, where there is a transaction of money, you'll see it is always the man. I always see my press wali and press wala as a couple, they press, but mostly the money transaction is with the man, because he's the person who comes and gives the cloth at night by the time she's gone to her house to cook. So then many times she doesn't feel that she's working. She's helping her husband at the most. So those dynamics, so even when you have small businesses, the contractor who gives work informally is always a man. So wherever there are power structures, you'll see the greater power is with the man. Economically, the women are at the lowest. So that structure still remains, where the control is with the man at the family level, at the work level. So it's very important to have women's own organization, coming back again to SEWA, where these kind of dynamics are broken, where women are in charge of powers. So Ilaben always believed, like Gandhiji, to have cooperatives, women owned, women managed kind of organization. So that is another mechanism of working, I think.
And I remember when I was, working at SEWA and talking to some of the weavers in Fulia, our women, our behene in Fulia who are weavers, they talked about when they became part of cooperative and all. That was one of the first times they also started having their own bank account. Which was like in the starting, it felt very alien because of the you are normed in a way that you're not. You will take care of managing the money, but owning it, is a different thing. And then how they felt proud about it for a period of time, and led to like more that, like that money is being spent on more on education in household versus less likely be to spent on alcohol and other stuff. Then men
to have more control over the money.
Men have more control.
Also, when you're talking about Fulia, I suddenly remembered you were involved in Fulia, and during the pandemic, we tried to break the chain of dependence. See, it's not always that you have to break the chain. That system works. We do not have an alternate system at times. And the contractor always is also not a villain. So many a times he also helps in certain events and all. But to have a fair play, I think women need to have kind of a voice. So what happened during pandemic, we tried, you remember, to get them into some kind of a digital media of selling few of the products. So few women had built in some kind of a products at home. So that was the time we taught them about Facebook, WhatsApp and all, and directly coordinating and talking to the buyer. So when she was coordinating with the buyer, I remember this weaver Ben, Rupa Ben, she coordinated, she was shy because she was never doing this, and then she quoted a fee and that person also agreed. That was the first time she said something. I never knew that my labor for a sari was worth this much.
And can you elaborate, like how much did she get versus how much she was getting while working under the middlemen? And these are men.
More or less, I would say they get 300, 500 per sari. But if she puts in, but you see the raw material also comes. If she puts in a raw material and all, she can get around 2,000, 3,000 depending on her skill.
So of course, like 8 to 10 times.
Yeah, but you have to eliminate the raw material cost and all. But here it is very important that again coming together for economic reasons. One, what I pointed out till now was on their rights, voices. The economic reason also. Then they have efficiencies of scale. They buy raw material together. They have to look for the market. So have to come out from that comfort level. So that is what the nudge that we are doing, the push that we are giving them, so that they come, manage their businesses. And now government also has formulated a lot of schemes, but to get hold of the schemes, to use them, I think organizations like us have to play a major role into it.
Right. And like you're talking about schemes, right? But in terms of not just informal economy, if we talk about the larger challenge that women in the workforce face, do you think we have the kind of laws in the first place that should ensure, or the policies for that matter, that should ensure that these kind of discrimination, this kind of like challenge that women face doesn't exist? And if not, what kind of laws are needed?
I think there have been few laws which encourage women to have that kind of leverage on business and all. But to enable them to make a business plan, I've also interacted with formal women, and I thought maybe it's they find it easier to get a loan and all. They said, Sanchita, it's not the case. When a woman approaches a bank as an entrepreneur, she's questioned more. She's not believed. That trust is missing. So that doesn't come on paper, but they sense that kind of thing. So that's something to do with social culture. So things should go hand in hand. The cultural change, the mindset change, as well as the laws. But definitely lots can be done. There are lots of women collectives who have not grown as much that they could, because to grow you need more capital, access to finance, conducive policies, good market, maybe a few buying from women entrepreneurs. There are laws, but I think that has to be enforced more, so that could promote such collectives. So if people are more aware of these collectives, that women need to be encouraged, then I think they can enter this economic platform also in a better way.
And it's interesting you talked about the culture, right? Because SEBI and I think Article 149 also of Ministry of Corporate Affairs talks a lot about having women on all these, as part of boards. They're part of, as a member, they're part of board of directors, and the companies are mandated to have them. And I think the data is like around 60% of the women are on these executive boards. However, I think the participation is just less than 20%. It talks a lot about like you have them, but they still don't have much decision-making power. So it felt like very tokenistic in nature at the end of the day. So how do you see like these kind of policies which like on paper exist, but are not working in a way that brings about the intended change that they should be?
Many women also do not want to take promotions or that kind of responsibility, because she has a lot of responsibilities at home. So women do shy away from taking up certain responsibilities. So the screening happens from her own end. There are also screening processes in the office which may not allow, means through that gendered lens, probably she's seeing in that way. I would also say, Nikunj, there is a lot to do at the family level also, sharing responsibilities. So like at one point even I had to leave my work there to take, and I thought it was perfect, that the children are growing up, so I need to step back. But if I had the kind of support that the organization is giving now, maybe I could have remained. And so retaining them, allowing them to grow is something that the policies in the office or otherwise could do. But sharing a lot of responsibilities like household chores, childcare, elderly care is something that we need to look at more intensively.
Yeah, even if you think of a heteronormative and a cis-normative structure of a family, the men need to be pulling more weight in the house, around. They need to be better allies at the very least. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, that is true. Unfortunately, we don't educate our boys in that way, taking household responsibilities. So that is where we share. Means we give them the best schools, colleges, but these kind of helping them in having a balanced life or sharing responsibility, something as family members we need to focus more.
As a society also, as part of education system, I think that has a huge role to play as well. I think even at many times, I have been a teacher for a couple of years, as you know, and I've seen many times textbooks reinforcing those gender stereotypes, where it's like a woman is traditionally showing, even a child in a textbook is traditionally showing, being shown playing with like a kitchen set, and a boy being shown playing with like a truck, and things like that, and how
it starts from the very beginning.
And if we ask like people close your eyes, imagine who comes to your mind when you think of a doctor and you think of a nurse. There's such a clear gendered angle to that, and our perceptions are not broad as well that way.
I'm glad few advertisements in public fora, they're creating that kind of a noise or kind of system mindset change. But generally, I think there is a lot that we as citizens, we as family members also need to change.
Yeah.
If the process is simultaneous, the change will come better.
And one is the family members, right? But if you think about the corporates and in the larger institutions in general, I mean, we celebrate May Day as Labor's Day. We celebrate International Women's Day, and suddenly you will see the greetings. All the brands are gifting. Funnily, some of my friends were mentioning how they're gifted makeup in the formal workspaces of all things. Nothing wrong with makeup, but why only makeup, right?
They're also lost. It's like a tick mark on the box so they're also lost. So in our office, we wish the men colleagues also that happy International Women's Day and all. I think it's something we need to all celebrate as equal.
Yeah. And you said these are tick boxes, which is again very tokenistic. Versus bringing about concrete change in policies within your companies as well.
That is something it becomes an event. It's because, but I think there should be more thoughts how to make it more inclusive, how to make it more comfortable, how to make it more conducive to get more women.
Right. And something else that's also there is that when women are facing discrimination, right, and they're speaking up, they're often penalized for that. There's not enough space. You were talking about how, because it's an organization which has mostly women, you are more you maybe are feeling slightly more comfortable to share their issues because you feel someone will understand versus if it was a mostly men organization.
Definitely. So, I would think twice to voice out something.
And so how does that penalization works? We look at just Me Too. When the Me Too movement started, suddenly so many women came out and said, oh, this has happened with us, this has happened with us. And so many women who still may not have been able to come out because of different reasons. So the issue is very big, but they are also not able to come out because there are larger I think,
implications and all. And you see, these are all, many of them, they're all so-called powerful, successful women who never voiced. And it's very scary that in spite of many things that are happening, and these are, many of the countries are also very developed, so-called developed countries. There, women with some kind of a social stature and recognition and success did not have the courage to voice. So that means there is a lot that are coming as a barrier which we have not been able to see.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, you're just talking about leadership, right? I mean, these are powerful women, but often not all of them are able to reach that stage.
No.
Women are often marginalized for leadership roles, marginalized in the sense that they're often overlooked, which actually offers greater compensation and better job security, and obviously be able to affect policies in a certain way. Men earn 82% of the income versus women earning 18% of that as well in India. And so from this lens, there is a clear gender gap that exists, right, in the Indian workforce. That way, have you seen that gender pay gap that comes about?
I can talk more about the informal sector.
Yes.
So when it's a construction workers, we also found for the same work, the woman is paid lesser than the man. The same kind of work. So this always happens. That for construction workers, definitely I've seen.
And sorry, how much less it would be?
1/3 by 1/3 almost.
By 1/3.
So 30% less.
Wow.
So that is one that we see. The other part is for the woman, she also does not acquire higher skill or higher paying work. I think the formula is just the same as corporate. She doesn't want to reach to the ladder of success, so-called success, because she has other responsibilities externally within the organization. Maybe there are certain challenges which does not allow her. There are challenges in the house also which does not allow, and she does not want to. So she does not acquire those kind of a skill, something. So even in the informal sector, so this is where SEWA has also been working to give more upgraded skill training, so that she gets better equipped to take better kind of work, which gives her more wages. So construction workers are given like plumbing work, electrician work, or mixing sand instead of just carrying bricks. So even weavers that you have seen, those kind of better skilled weaving skills are being given. But rate disparity happens even with weavers. I've seen that for a man weaving a particular sari gets more than the woman weaving that kind of a sari.
Right. And we were talking about, this data is so staggering. I mean, in the fact that like 1/3 less for the same construction work, and which talks about just like the norms and the perception of even the labor versus which is maybe equal or even more in some cases for women. And and we were just talking about May Day and Women's Day, right? There's this interesting on Twitter. I don't know how active are you on Twitter now. I see you're more active on LinkedIn right now, but I don't know about Twitter.
I also have people to help me.
Yeah, to do it.
I'm not very naturally on these things.
Right, of course.
But I think I need to be. So I tell people that do as much as the organization needs. Sometimes help me.
That's true. And I think for the Twitter, right? I was checking this. Like Twitter is a wonderful space. There's a gender pay gap bot. I'm forgetting who made this. But essentially, anytime on Women's Day, a company is saying, "Oh, you know what? This is great. This, that, etc. Oh, you know, we're celebrating women this day." The bot works in a way it automatically fetches the data for that company and says, "In your company, this is the pay gap."
Oh God!
Like, and it's all automatic.
Oh really?
So calling out companies for exactly how it is in a very realistic way.
Oh, wonderful!
and it's just like lay bare, like it's again very tokenistic. But you were just talking about informal economy, right? Like it's so staggering that I think four out of 5 jobs that are created in Indian economy, 4 out of 5
formal jobs.
No, 4 out of 5 5 jobs are created. 4 of them will go to women. Versus if 3 jobs, it is 2 in 3. Like 3 jobs created for men, then 2 are going to men who are in informal, right? So women are disproportionately more represented in informal economy. 90% of the workforce close to that is part of informal economy as well, which is where like there is no contract.
There's all informal employment conditions.
It's all informal conditions, right? There is no healthcare, there's no insurance, no workplace safety, and like a lot of other, I think, challenges that way. But before we delve into a little bit about that, I think, how do you think a day in the life of a formal worker and an informal worker, how differently does it look like?
So I think for a formal worker, her work role is more defined and probably less interrupted by household responsibilities. For an informal worker, many a times the workplace is also the house. So her responsibilities of the house gets mixed up with her productive responsibility. That also brings us to another issue, that when they are at the child rearing stage or elderly care stage, their productivity also goes down, which means no direct income. So because the system does not allow her to be productive at that. So there is a lot that she does. I think fetching water only is a big issue. For a formal person, I think you open the tap, there's water. For an informal, this could take some time. Away from her work-related responsibilities, house-related responsibilities, because we also see infrastructural support around the places where the informal sector workers or families stay. The infrastructural supports are also poor. So easily available things that a formal employee will get, like access to electricity, uninterrupted electricity, water, road, drainage. That is a daily challenge that she faces. Or a child care system, the Anganwadi, to be open during her working hours, to get proper food in the Anganwadi. That's, I think, a daily challenge that she faces.
And I think earlier you also mentioned that how a formal worker is dependent on an informal worker,
Yes.
like a domestic worker,
yes,
or
yes,
like other kind of workers, to ensure that like their life is smoother, and like they're able to do the formal work versus someone else might be taking some of the burden off them for all this kind of work as well.
So, in my house, I have a domestic worker male who comes in the evening, and the domestic worker woman who comes in the morning. So because I'm in this sector, I'm more sensitive. So it is also important to understand this. I've seen in a month she takes quite a lot of leaves compared to the man. So somehow or the other he understands. Though I tend not to give the burden to the utensils to the man, and he keeps cribbing, hasn't she taken leave, hasn't she taken leave? Then I tell him that when you go home, do you have to cook? When in the morning, do you get cooked food? So she goes home and does the cooking part. If her daughter falls ill, if her husband falls ill, if her mother-in-law falls ill, she takes leave. There are times when she came to our house when she was not feeling good. So she is more responsible to her family, and like that your wife becomes more. So you count from your wife whether she takes more leaves than you. So I think these type of little understanding is very important. But it affects our life because she is in that informal setup with no correct distribution or equal distribution of work. Her life is affected. Then somehow when she does not come, the formal employees' work life is also affected because at home there is no equal distribution. So I remember I was there in one session where Dr. V.K. Paul, the pediatrician who's in Niti Aayog, he asked the audience, how many of the men take leave when the children are unwell? That's a big question. That's a big question.
Yeah. and I think even the scale is so huge. I think 82% of, I think ILO said that 82% of all working women in India are part of informal economy.
Yes.
Which is like 4 in 5 again that way, right? So when we say informal economy, right? Can you share a little bit about what all constitutes
informality? So other than the work dynamics, like there is of course no social protection involved in, there's no contract of work. So definitely the rates, that is another thing. The regularity of pay could be impacted. Then regularity of work. So you do not have the same volume of work through like a salaried person throughout. So she has to plan. She has to look for other work which can support her income. That is something about the work. Then workplace. If her house is the workplace, whether that allows her to work. If there is a care system absent or she needs to do. So there could be also work which could be hazardous. Like even a small thing. If she's working with those embellishments that you have. If there's a child there, could put it in the mouth. So safety concerns. She also doesn't have the infrastructure around her, like drainage, water, etc. around her, which is, so health concerns are there. So if she's not healthy, her work is impacted, lower income. Then the social protection. So many of them lack social security benefit. Few states have an active social security board where they can be actually registered and get certain benefits like insurance, accidental insurance, other insurance, health kind of. Then she spends a lot of money on healthcare because she finds the public healthcare system very difficult to reach. It's time consuming. So a lot of money goes into the private healthcare system. Definitely, health, children's education is something that she saves and spends her money. The other part is when she faces domestic violence. Many of the places we have created those safe places where she can come and voice it. So she doesn't have any access to a platform or even her neighborhood, because to get women together to give her that kind of support also is lacking in many of the structures. That so overall there are challenges that she faces as a worker, as a woman, as a family member, then even negotiating her working space in a marketplace. So that is what SEWA also tried to help to get defined working space for the women. So even when she's out as a vendor, getting a proper washroom. So in her menstrual cycle, it is very difficult. So those kind of issues, challenges are always there. So even if you go to a market, you'll see proper market area with big shops are owned by the men.
Yeah.
So women who are poorer, they will find some place insecure, maybe thrown out. So every day she may have to negotiate for that kind of a place. I'm very happy to see there are certain states which have compartments reserved for vendors. So they can at least travel with their vending. So if the infrastructure, including transport system, public transport systems are good, I think there is better connection of their produce to the consumers. Right. I've seen in Mumbai, in West Bengal, you have these local trains. So I feel staying in Mumbai, you can have fresh food because the villages are somehow connected. In Bengal also, villages are somehow connected. So it's a gain, net gain kind of a situation. So she will also lack this thing. So vendor passes are also given in certain places. So I think these are a few of the challenges around her, lack of opportunities around her. And now there are certain things with technology is helping her in efficiency, but technology is also taking her work away. For example, agarbatti rolling was some work that poor women with low skill used to do. That has been replaced by a machine. So papad also, I think a machine would come. So sometimes technology can also take away their work, and that is a time where they're not ready to take up another work. So the readiness is often absent because technology will come, but poorer women lack that readiness to adapt.
And I think sometimes it's about leveraging the technology also and having the means.
Yes.
Like I remember when we were working at SEWA and you know, when we were working with the with the Behne, and like, so she was least likely to have access to one mobile phone that is there.
Yeah.
So the man has the most access. Then like kids will have it, then someone else in the family would have it, and she will get the last access. When there's limited data pack, when like at the end of the day, maybe like everything. So even if she wants to like do something productive with it, often the lack of it,
the asset itself. With technology, the access to asset is very important.
Right. And you're also talking about like domestic workers, beady rollers. You're talking about weavers. We have been talking about vendors. So what is the breadth of all the work that comes under informal labor?
I think it's huge, and there are also kind of works that probably we are yet to trace. So there is a kind of a service kind of a work, like domestic workers or kind of a construction worker. There is a kind that are small produce. So she can be agricultural workers or home-based kind of worker. There is one where she may not be producing, but selling something, like the fruit vendors, vegetable vendors, or even the old cloth market. Of course, in the old cloth, there's a back-end work that they do. From old to make it marketable, they do a lot of back-end work. So these are, and there is of course artisanal workers who do a lot of though they have the skill over ancestors or various generations that are passed. So that is another kind of work. Agriculture is one of the major work in this informal sector. Even in agriculture, there are differences. Our kind of women are all mostly small farmers. And in many of the places, they do not even have land. So they become sharecropper. So on other people's land, and they get a part of the produce. So these are major, the domestic workers also included. There is another which comes as the waste pickers, rack pickers, and maybe some of them may not be pickers, but they segregate. That's also, and with urbanization happening, this is another trade that is being picked up more and more by the most marginalized women and men, and most of them are migrant and belonging to a certain caste, have no other options, and they're picking up segregation kind of a work. And in a way, they are contributing to the environment, but I think they need also a lot of recognition to make the environment cleaner.
Sanchita Ben, we have been discussing a lot about informal economy, right? I think one of the things is just the sheer power dynamics that are involved in this, right? A domestic worker working in an upper class household is more vulnerable to physical and at times even sexual violence as well, right? Which can also be exacerbated by migrant status or lack of support that may exist for her, including legal. So in such a state, how important is bargaining power or a lack of bargaining power thereof in this case, and how does that kind of affect her day-to-day work, where she may not be able to at times let go of those oppressive spaces as well?
I'll tell you, there's something called the My Fair Home campaign. So it all talks about her working condition and a lot of about the employer's attitude towards her. So we have this kind of a campaign and awareness with many of the employers of the domestic workers, and I would say that many of the employers have become sensitized to this. So it is important to see the domestic workers as a human being. Her needs, basic needs, feeling thirsty, need for a washroom, need for leave, some resting hours, need for some kind of medical assistance. So we are also trying to see that she is covered by, first of all, she is recognized as a domestic worker in India through the through ILO. I think it was, I mean, it has not been ratified, but some of the, in India, but in some of the states, domestic workers are recognized as a worker. So when she is recognized as a worker, then the Social Security Board of that state becomes responsible to, or place is there where she can access some social security benefit. By this campaign, at least we have been able to ensure that she gets the mandatory leave with pay. Then some kind of a behavior kind, treat her as a more human being with respect. So this is a campaign that we are doing not only with SEWA, but it has a national level platform with other domestic workers. But the important part is when people like us who are users of domestic workers understand these issues. I'm not saying the violence part is something that I'll talk about later, but treat her well and understand her well, that itself creates a lot of change. And the other part is also addressing. So many of the women said that now many of the employees call them Didi, Ben, that kind of, that is also very important that they say. Many a times we also find that there are allegations of thefts on her. Then she is suddenly thrown out of the work. Then physical abuse, even sexual exploitation. Now, we try to build up a rapport with the local police station. Then she becomes part of this entire union structure, where she feels there are other workers, domestic workers, other workers, where her voice is heard, her complaints are listened to, and that is one very important part when she's under a union or kind of a structure, and then her complaints are registered. All this needs kind of a hand-holding kind of a support. Now this kind of support, what we teach the local leaders or local domestic workers who are veteran, they also gradually pick up that kind of a relationship with the local police. They also take it up. So once there is a structure, I think then the employers also know that they cannot go beyond this limit. So that is very important, that to have that kind of a solidarity structure, then that kind of a relationship with the local authority is very important. The other part is rate. So when they are united, they also can fix up their rates. Sometimes they need the local government to do it, but they can also fix up this rate for this kind of work. Otherwise, if it is negotiable, then actually it is not negotiable. The negotiation is done by the employer. So if they are united, they can talk, they can fix up their rates. So nobody takes lower rate than that. This is one part. The other part is most of these domestic workers are migrant. So during particular seasons like agriculture, they have to go back to the villages. So that is some arrangement, that her absence, her lack of pay, or these things, this is something that they face as a challenge. And when they are into a state where they are acting as domestic workers, most of them have identity documents which belong to their native places. So this also becomes a challenge to that state where they are working, because she's not registered as a worker there. So access to any issues, any problems, so that kind of a network, she cannot be covered. So even the fact that she leaves a ration card, so I know the portability and all that is being talked about. So here she works under extreme conditions, like no proper infrastructure, rent arrangements, very, very informal. Then access to many other things becomes very, very limited. So these are the challenges, but definitely SEWA is also working. There's a large part of SEWA which is working at international level, national level on the domestic workers. So here what we do is we form trade groups. So domestic workers get together to form committee, and she is then given that kind of a training, and she gives that representation about her issue. The other forum that we arrange is the Jan Sunbhai, or in English you can say public hearing.
Public hearing, yeah.
So where local authorities are brought, and these domestic workers tell about the issues, and the local authorities then they hear one-to-one basis, not through any other channel, not even us. So then they give certain solutions, or they explain what are their limitations. So I think Jan Sunbhai itself is very empowering, and itself is a collaborative process. So these are the processes, I think. And the more you do the My Fair campaign, and we are trying to do it over some channel here, so that the aim is to give that kind of a sensitization to all the families that use domestic workers.
Right. And this is the case of domestic workers. If we talk about the larger informal workers, right? I mean, the perpetrators of violence are so diverse in informal workspace. It can be the state in terms of vendors, right? You know, your traffic cop, you know, you someone else. It can be, like you were saying, like, you know, a particular household who's doing it. It can be the contractor. And so there are so many like perpetrators of violence that way. So in what all ways does this violence manifest against informal workers?
Violence can be related to work. And 11's definition is, I think she has expanded the definition of violence, not to be able to work or not to be able to get proper remuneration is also a form of violence, you see.
Right.
So, but let me come to the violence part, that abuses, sexual or other physical. So, you have this POSH Act, but to use it for the informal workers is also something that we're trying to do, because the fact the workplace definition is only difficult with informal workers. So we are also trying to define the workplace. So in an agricultural field, her workplace could be the field. So we carry a lot of sessions with the women to make them understand that this is true. There is a policy which says this is wrong. So if this happens to you, you have a voice. So we are also trying to help in forming those LCC, local committees, for hearing these complaints. So in most of the places, they are also not active. So in few places where they have been formed, they are also lost as how to address this.
Right.
So that kind of training also we are trying to do. So I think when the women become aware of what is right, what is wrong, and then plus they have a place to voice it. She's not judged by what she has said. So those are things that I think slowly the changes we are hoping to bring.
But you were also saying earlier, like there are different kind of violence as well, like just not being able to, earn income is a,
Yes, I think that's a violence that we all create. I remember one thing that's very interesting. There used to be one man who used to come and clean our bathrooms, toilets. So, and he used to stay mostly in the villages, and he used to sometimes come. So whenever he used to come, we all used to be happy, because he was a very hard kind of a worker. And he would never stop his work. He was used to do very thoroughly. But whenever I used to ask him, how much do I pay you? He used to say, whatever you feel like. Because I'm in this sector, I said, no, you should have a rate. You should have a rate. So he said, no, whatever we feel like. So I said, so when you do this, definitely, I do not know what is fair. But if you do not know what is your worth, then many people will start exploiting you. So he didn't seem much bothered, and he was always available with the service. For a few months, he was not there. And I kept asking, where is this man? Well, he has gone to his village. Then one day I suddenly met him. You have come? Yeah, I got some work, that 100 days Manrega work. So I said, why don't you come? So he came, and again, as usual, I said, how much? This time he had a rate. And I was so happy. Then I thought maybe he made some calculation that Manrega pays me this many for these many hours, then I should be asking this. So I think also to be aware what you're worth is something that may prevent you from that kind of economic violence, and be able to negotiate. That is very important.
And even in terms of violence, there are like so many barriers that prevent workers to even, seek justice.
Yes.
And like, or even resolve the issues that exist, right? So what are those kind of barriers? And like in your work, like has there been in ways where you have tried to create those forums where that can exist?
Yeah, that LCC, that local committee which is needed to be formed, where women can come and complain. That is something in Delhi particularly we are trying to enforce. Not only enforce, we are also trying to assist. Because, these people who are in the committee also need
and
that kind of...
And is this like similar to a town vending committee?
Yeah, town vending committees for a purpose, but this is under the POSH Act only.
This is only
the POSH Act. So that is something that we are trying to, and also educating officials to take up this responsibility, to understand certain nuances of violence. There is a lot of domestic violence that happens in the house. So that also, sometimes you do not even have to go to for legal help. When a group of women or empowered women come and visit the house and tell the man that it is wrong, sometimes the man also does not realize that it is a wrong thing.
Yeah.
And there are implications of doing it. We have seen many of the times that stops there.
Right.
Because he feels that she's alone, she has no voice, and I can do it, I'm her husband. So to break that kind of a myth is also very important. So everything need not have huge structures or smaller structures, smaller women groups from the ground can also be very, very effective.
Right. And even there are like a lot of occupational hazards
Yes.
that women are facing, like which is an own different kind of violence, right? Like salt workers, like
Yes,
their
yes.
feet become so hard, like over a period of time that even when the bodies are cremated, like they're one of the last parts.
I know.
The weavers, they develop spine issues. The workers who working with like cotton and those kind of things develop respiratory issues as well. But there is no like kind of a insurance. There's no like health avail.
We are trying to work with the government to build some kind of a budget or awareness on occupational health issues in the social security. There's also this waste segregators, and sometimes they get the waste at home. So you'll also listen to many of the incidents of some slums catching fire because a lot of methane gases as comes out of those wastes, so which catches fire very easily. So there are children in the house, when you're working in the house with waste packets all around it. That itself is a very hazardous work.
Yeah.
Small equipments or tools like gloves, then kind of a mask. Those are very important. But many of the work are quite neglected, like the waste. How many of us also realize who is cleaning our waste? Where is it going? How many people are working there? Do they have access to basic health issues? So those are, I think, at a policy level, lots to be done.
Right. And I think the other dynamic is also the caste and the class, right? I remember CWDS report quoted in NSSO data from 2019, which is like 15 years old almost, where I think in domestic work, close to 32% are from other backwards classes, and then you have 31% from scheduled caste, and like I think 28 to 29% from upper caste. So how does caste, class, and then gender intersect to further marginalize women? Because women are again 80% of the domestic workforce is women, right? So how does this caste, class, and gender intersect to further marginalize, double marginalize, triple marginalize women in this?
We have seen the most vulnerable out of this informal also belong to a kind of a backward class or a caste. So there are certain traits which are associated with a particular caste. Like for example, cleaning work or washing the toilets, sweepers, or even waste pickers. They belong to a certain caste, most vulnerable economically and otherwise also. So they also migrate. So when they migrate, because of low in skill, low in opportunities, and also ostracized by society, they become the most marginalized and being a woman. So the skill to go to a better earning does not rest with them. The work is so much caste divided. So to bring them to get an alternate, first of all, to get an alternate income or alternate employability is also challenging. And the readiness from the prospect of giving that is different. The hesitancy from her to move to another kind of work is also there. So I think many of those gaps are something that we should work on, like giving a decent, dignified kind of a income generation source is very important. So that's something that we need to all work together. Dignity of work is something very important.
Right.
And these unfortunately have the caste, class, gender have a lot of bearing on the dignity of work.
I think that's such an important word, right? Dignity. I think to be able to carry out your work and not continue to perpetuate those but more importantly, caste and religion and all those based oppressions that has been going on for quite some time. And I think it is so evident in the way that it perpetuates in labor, and we don't really do much about it.
Yeah, there are also places where access to a water source is also limited based on caste.
Like wells, for example, where it's still not allowed to access it. I think we're coming towards like the end of the episode. But we have been talking a lot about formal economy, right? And when we talk about how the women in formal economy are fighting for certain rights, right? And interestingly, how when you explained informal economy, it looks like the women are the kind of rights they're fighting for are the rights that formal economy women have. So it's like a very interesting dynamics, and there is a possibility that the formal economy worker is employing an informal economy worker, and you can take it women wise as well. So how do we go about it? Like how does that roadmap look like, where informal economy workers can finally, or at least have the rights that formal economy workers have?
Long way. Informal economy to the like the formal economy, I think it's a long way. First of all, the surety of work, to get work throughout the year, which can give her social protection, food security, education for her children, and to be relevant with her skills to the changing environment, is something that is extremely challenging for the informal workers. So I think we are at the stage where basic working rights and condition is a big challenge. So a long way to go.
And I think having that right enshrined, the right to dignified labor, can also be like so important.
Yeah, it is important.
I think we are just recording this episode when the elections recently happened, the result came out, the new government just got sworn in as well. So if Sanchita Ben would be one of the 543, I think, elected, one of the 543 elected member of parliament, what kind of bill or what kind of policy she would push or advocate for the most?
I think there's a lot to do in the pandemic. I heard that what we encountered is women's work. So I think out of many things, women's easy access to working capital, whether singly or in groups as a collective, should be given with a lot of understanding, not only giving that as a lower rate income, but the hand-holding and of a support is a holistic approach to give that kind of access would really change the economic dynamics. So finance plus other services,
right,
would be the package that I would recommend for this women and their groups.
Yeah, and I think that's so right, because women often may not have assets to kind of get loan in lieu of that, right?
Women may not be able to make a small business plan,
right?
So that's why I'm saying not only finance that I need, but the plus services as a package,
as like a bouquet of services. Yeah. It has been such a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. I felt very good.
No, thank you for that. Could you, like towards the end, could you share like 3 things to read, 2 things to watch or listen, and 1 person to follow?
Oh, 3 things to read. I would definitely say there are lots of material within SEWA that is built. I think this book, We Are Poor So Many, I've read it so many times. That is one book you can read. The other part was Anubandh. I felt about that society. I get lost in that society where basic things are assured within a certain perimeter. That is something. The other, let me come back to it. One to follow.
1 person to follow.
1 person to follow. I think I've always gone back to reading what Ilaben has said. So I keep like a hungry person try to see what Ilaben has said on this topic, on that topic, her books. I find they're very simple and deep. That has impacted my life a lot. And what is the other thing?
The 2 things to watch or listen.
Acha. Watch, I think there are a lot of good films on women, or may not be also women, but tribal population, villages. Those are things I think, and it's not always a very sad picture, but there are so many movies that are showing them as empowering. Manthan is one movie I would ask people to watch.
Manthan?
Manthan is one movie that I would ask people to watch. Coming back to the book, I think light reading is, and Rabindranath's many of the short stories, I feel it was very women-centric, women's emotions, women's needs. I think that is also one can read.
And
At that time, certain women's needs came up, whether it's emotion or otherwise. I think that is something that one can read.
perfect. And lastly, I think you wrote a postcard to your future self at
Yes.
the start of the episode. Do you mind reading it out?
Yeah, that was an interesting journey. So it's dated 11th of June 2024, which is today. I'm writing to Sanchita, who is 10 years away from this timeline. So, dear Sanchita, hope you are enjoying good health with your children, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren. Remember how I always checked my phone for emails and messages? I'm sure you are living happily without all these nuisances. I feel sorry that I have not been responsible enough to work more in ensuring good, clean air. Each time you cough, I feel guilty. Remember how I was committed towards women's empowerment? I feel so happy to know that you and your friends eat their meals once a week on the table with your domestic help. Oh, did I hear a doorbell? Is that the electrician? Wow, Sita Ben, the society electrician has come with her tools. Take care, Sanchita.
Thank you. That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it was such an interesting discussion, and always a pleasure to learn from you always. And as we close this episode, I think I'm reminded of this lament by a young bride. Actually, I came across this in Ela Ben's book, We Are Poor But So Many, as well, where she talks about this young bride who got married into an Agaria family, like salt worker.
Salt workers, yes.
In like Kutch. And so the lines are, I saw that strange land and my Agaria span, and my eyes welled up with sand. My mother, why did you marry me to an Agaria? I burnished those pans with my bare hands and crushed the salt with my bare feet. My tears, they're saltier than salt, mother. I rise so early in the morning and harvest the salt all day, all night. My mother, why did you give me to the Agarias? I may die young, but don't hurry me to a pyre. My flesh will burn, but my bones will wait for you. My mother, why did you give me to the Agarias?
I think these are moments that we should relate to, even we are having any kind of food which has salt.
Every time we have salt.
So much.
But yeah, thank you so much again.
Thank you, Nikunj.
Thank you for your time.
Wonderful interacting with you.
We often talk about developed nations should be providing finance to developing nations. But what is interesting is also that even this money that already exists, it goes to specific developing nations. It's called São Bernardo do Campo, which is an industrial city. Now it's less industrial, but I can talk about the changes in a bit.